Okay, so we are watching the first jam of the scrimmage that we did when I was at practice. And the team we're going to focus on first is the black team. So let's go ahead and take a look at their stance with the jammer coming in. So their opposing jammer is right here, and they have a 2-1. All blockers are looking at the jammer, and then their fourth player is right here doing offense, and it looks like she's wanting to open up the inside lane. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we see the 3 unit taking advantage of a formation, a defensive formation that kind of moves and rotates and pivots. So we see here that the person who had been the brace or the stabilizer is now holding that jammer with her side body, and it looks like the person who had been part of the wall is stabilizing her. If you notice, these 2 blockers that we can see are all very upright. And so that's a theme that we're going to see in scrimmage and with your player. So we'll hit play and see what happens. So the player who had been gone to play offense has now come back. She almost did something that we call taking away a hit, where she almost squeezed her body in here and took the hit away from this blocker. But again, we see all of the black blockers pretty much standing upright. Still assisting, bodies on. Lots of thinking about catching with the chest. This is another theme we see for your team. We have one of the players flip. She's blocking with her side body and her back. We like that. At this point, the skater here is out of position. So she's made a lot of movement from being back here where she played offense to now being in front of the pack. So hopefully what we'll see her do immediately is turn around and go back to support this group. Okay, so we do see her turn around, but she's not quite ready. Number 33 isn't quite ready to go and like get hands on the situation. And this is where the blocker is. This is where she is. So we'll just point this out. This is very common what 33 is doing. She's doing something that we call like blocking in the future, or she's preparing to catch when and if the jammer should ever get to her. So if this is something that's common for 33, we would want to encourage her to get into the game rather than kind of watch the game. Also, if you notice right now, there's nobody that's about to bridge, okay? And so this jammer is doing a good job of pushing everyone forward. And so with this skater here not immediately physically blocking the jammer, she's not only out of position, but she could also be a potential bridge for the group more in this area. Okay, so the jammer is able to push pretty strong, and we're seeing that our officiator in the middle is saying, is about to say no pack. But meanwhile, this jammer is getting out, and she's gone. Okay, so get this. These skaters here haven't quite come to terms with the fact that the jammer is gone. She's not coming back. I see it, this skater could potentially maybe have a better line. Like if this skater here aims for this line, this trajectory, then maybe she could catch that jammer again. But otherwise, this is one of the first points where a defense to offense switch needs to take place, or could take place if you're wanting to get your jammers out even faster. So now we have someone who's about to be lead jam. So this team here, blacks, they want to get their jammer out or that star moving as fast as possible, and this type of positioning just doesn't tell me that they're ready for that. But let's see what happens. Okay, so yeah, we see that the whole group kind of skated forward at least, 7 feet, even though this jammer was out, had a better course, and she was gone. And so that's one of the first places that you'd want to clean up your defense to offense switches, is by having like moments like this where you realize that that jammer ain't coming back and you don't have a good position to get her. You no longer are trying to play defense on her, and you're already thinking about playing offense. Now, I want you all to see the positioning for all these skaters. They have their back to the jammer, right? And this is a great position that they should be in if they're wanting to catch the opposing jammer, if they're wanting to play defense. But this here is not an offensive positioning. So hopefully what we'll see them do, what I would prefer is for them to turn around and go back to where the action is. But I've watched this jam quite a few times, and that's not exactly what happens. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we see them kind of turn around and get stopped. This skater 33 is turning around and getting stopped. 18, definitely looks like she wants to go back. But check this out. They don't actually really move that much. And so this type of offensive play, I'm going to tell you two things about it. One, I actually really like how this offensive maneuver worked out, but I think that you all need to make some modifications for it. So I want you to look at it and just take a second to think, which modifications should we make to it? So get this, watch, let's watch. So you all position yourself. So this player here is positioning herself in front of this one. This player here looks like she's about to be woman on woman. These players here are about to be woman on woman. And so essentially what you all do is you create like a blind or some type of shield, and you prevent all of these green blockers from coming forward, and your black jammer then gets out. We really, really like that. So that took 5 seconds. We're going to watch it from the point where the opposing jammer gets lead, and we're going to see how long that takes. So here we go. Okay, so really this opposing jammer is really starting to get out around 10 seconds. And boom, your jammer's out at 18. So it takes you all 8 seconds to get your jammer out, which isn't awful, but I do want to remind you that in the future, some of your competition, some of those jammers, they won't be there by the time 8 seconds passes. They're going to be right here. So jammers are able to lap the pack in 8 seconds or less. So just keep that in mind, that type of defense to offense switch and finally getting your jammer out might not cut it against more competitive teams, okay? So now what we're interested in is we're interested to see what blacks then do, okay? Because they've just made a defense to offense switch, and now they're going to need to make another defensive switch. So let's see what happens. Okay, and so I like what these two skaters here are doing. They're kind of lining up, they're bracing, they're staying in front of the opponent. No need to put their points back behind the opponent. This skater here, this black skater, is out of position. She's removed from her teammate, so it'd be good if she would come up to them, and I think that's what happens. Yeah, okay, so it looks like this skater comes up to stabilize. We really like that. This skater here is coming up to join her team, but take a look at this. Look at where the officiator is, where this skater's hips are on that inside line, and where this skater is. I'm not positive, but she might have actually already been scored on. So that's just good to think and keep in mind, like, the reason we get into these defensive positions is not just to keep the jammer in, but it's also not to get scored on. So let's see what happens next. So she comes up to where her group is. We really, really like that. And she comes out here to guard the outside lane. I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, that's a pretty good option. That's a pretty good choice. The only thing that would be better than that is maybe if 138 could be in a place where she could help slow down this jammer, because this jammer is pretty pushy. Not pushy in attitude, obviously, but pushy like with strength and power. So let's see what happens. Okay, so at this point, I think that 138 and 33 have been scored on. Okay, so just good to know, or good to think about. And we see 138 bridging for her team, which is good, because they want to keep on playing defense, theoretically, because for some reason the green jammer isn't calling it off. So the green jammer is allowing the jam to go long, which means that she's giving the black jammer the opportunity to score. And I think that there might have been some confusion in this drill where the green jammer didn't realize she could call it off. I can't remember why this one ended up going long, but let's watch it anyway. Now, it looks like this skater is actually trying to get into position to play offense. So let's see what happens. And boom, she is, but the jammer doesn't quite read it, and the jammer goes for a different spot entirely. So I don't know if that's a lack of communication between 138 and 115, or if that was always meant to be a decoy. I'm not sure. 138 just skated off of the track, so that's just something to keep in mind, and most officiators would have given her a major penalty for skating off of the track. Okay, so this is interesting because the black jammer gets out and still the green jammer doesn't call it, although she's leading, she could. So then that leaves blacks to keep on blocking. At this point, we see that this black is out of position. She's not in a good spot to help her teammates out. So that's twice that we've seen that in this one jam. Okay, so that was watching the jam from the perspective of the blacks, and there's a couple of themes here. Okay, the themes that we've seen are stance, so the stance that the blacks have when they block. Another theme that we've had in this one is how quickly blacks know that they need to change from defense to offense or offense to defense. Another theme that we've had is individual skaters being out of play. So I don't mean out of play like the rule set. Sorry that it's confusing, but I mean like out of position. They're not necessarily playing defense or offense. They're kind of floating, watching the pack. And another thing that we have is point awareness. So even though you might be physically blocking the jammer, if she gets past you, she's gotten your point. So now we're going to watch the same exact jam from the perspective of the green team. So here we go. So it's a little harder to see the greens because they're behind the black, but we still see, we see a bend in the leg in everybody and a bend in the hip from everybody, but we don't see incredible utilization of the legs. And so remember, the only reason coaches use that old-fashioned phrase that's been said forever, get low, is it's really meaning get dynamic in your legs, utilize your legs, use your legs. Okay, so greens, they started off in the back and they're staying in the back. We really, really like that. So they hit the jammer out of bounds. And instead of everybody running back, they all kind of stayed together. They were conservative, so I like that. They all have like a hand reached out in some way, so that makes me think that they're all about to play together as a team. Let's watch and see what happens. We're going to go back and watch the beginning of this jam one more time, and we're going to see what happened with that offense that was coming in at the very beginning. Okay, so we liked what just happened. It's kind of hard to see, but this black skater tries to push the green skater out of position, and the green skater kind of just deflects the black skater off of her and keeps on blocking. Let's watch that again. So, okay, so we watched it again and we see that this skater got a little bit out of position, but not incredibly. So we like the way that this brace deflected that incoming offense. It also looks like this skater here is aware of the pack awareness, so she's not about to get a penalty, making sure that she doesn't go back and destroy the pack. So we see greens do a little bit of what blacks had done, which is change positions, change formations, not necessarily rotate or not necessarily move laterally side to side in the same position, but rotate a little bit. And so that's just fine. We also have this skater raising her hand and skating forward quickly, and I think that's because the officiator had just called no pack. And so this skater is showing that she is reforming the pack, and I really like that she's doing that. That's actually something that I coach people to do, so that's good. Now at this point, though, she doesn't need to go any further forward because the pack has already been reformed. So at this point, she would be doing one of two things: either keeping her eyes forward and getting ready to deflect these skaters from coming back, or she would turn around and start to help her team block. And so we see that all of these skaters scramble, and again, there's this really good offensive sweep that we had spoken about before. I really like what blacks are doing. And so basically, this skater here just skates quickly up, and greens suddenly find themselves out of position. So what led to that? Let's just watch, because greens are actually doing pretty well before that happened. So let's see. I think what happens is they push out of bounds, they all kind of congeal, and then they keep on rolling forward. If they had stopped really, really hard around the skater, stopped on her really, really hard, she'd be stuck here. And the thing is that they would have utilized a really good blocking tactic, and also they would have used a mistake that blacks were making against blacks. So in the previous description, I said blacks made a mistake and they didn't really go back very far. They kind of waited for their jammer to push these skaters up, and then they played offense rather than going back and playing offense. So if greens could have stopped and turned around and really just held this skater, then I don't think that would have happened. But they kind of roll forward with her, skate with her, and then we see that, we see them kind of just get pinched. So now let's see what greens are doing, because what they should be doing is setting up a massive offensive strike, because here's their jammer. And I do see this skater here kind of rounded on the black skater, so that makes me think maybe she's going to open up the inside lane. Greens don't really need to move this up. I mean, they could move it up and get the blacks to skate as an offensive strategy, but greens are actually in a really good position to just score quickly. But that's not what happens, so let's see what happens. Okay, so probably we all know why greens didn't want to get them going, because probably greens were concerned that the blacks were just going to skate off quickly. So they kind of hang back, blacks go to the front to block, and then greens don't really do much to play offense. And the fact that the greens could have stood back and started to block or get ready to play defense is what makes me think it was planned for the green jammer to go long. So let's watch what happens. So greens now are playing a strategy where they're essentially playing defense, and because they're back behind the blacks, they're also using distance to play offense, and that's a really smart play. So what I mean by this is that their jammer is able to push out of a pack because her opponents are at the top of a pack, and that allows green to have all the space to themselves in the back to play D. So that's a good strategy there. Now at this point, though, they need to remember that they don't want their hips to get past. Greens don't, because they're gambling right now. They're giving black an opportunity to score, hoping that they can get out and score more. So as they do this, they're trying to keep the black jammer in on this pass, and they're also not interested in her scoring. Now, again, we kind of seen that upright posture, that upright stance. That's a theme. So we'd want to look to being a little bit more dynamic in the legs. We hear a lot of communication, but mainly the communication is which lane the jammer is in. So I really like that greens are communicating which lane the jammer's in, but next step would be having a more description. You know, she's in lane 2, stop her. She's in lane 1, hit her out of bounds. She's in lane 4, try to pull a cut. She's in lane 3, don't let her push us up anymore. Get together, that's a good one. We like that one. But still, here we go. Do you see how now suddenly greens are in the front and black has just squeezed her way out? And so that kind of happened for the initial pass. That's how black got out in the first place. So obviously there's somewhere that greens, you know, although they're playing smart, they're communicating, they're missing out. So we're going to go back to when they were behind and they had control of that jammer. And we're going to show you what leads to it. So here they are, green is on there, there's another green, there's another green. But what's happened is the black jammer has gotten side by side with this green. And the only thing keeping the black jammer from getting out is this player here in her chest. And so when that jammer is able to just kind of, you know, ping pong off of her chest and boom, she gets out. And so at this point, we're hoping that the green jammer has gotten all 4 points because the black jammer certainly has. All right, so the themes that we see in this jam then are we see stance again. So stance comes into play, a very upright stance that doesn't seem incredibly dynamic, hoping to see if we can change that a bit. Maybe modifying the amount of time that you all spend blocking with your chests, hopefully changing that a bit so that you block with your backs and your butts a bit more. For the green team, making sure that, you know, you don't get squeezed past or pushed forward and then you're out of options for how to play defense. For greens, we like the communication, but maybe looking at being more specific now with communication. Greens, we like your pack awareness, but now we want to make sure you're not being overly conservative and bridging like at 7 feet or 5 feet rather than 10. All right, so nice work, and that's the end of the assessment for jam number 1.